Hello, Dr. Scott Gray here, host of Top Minds, where we talk with the top minds in healthcare, life, and business, such as the founder of the Orlando Magic, Pat Williams, and many more, and how they're making a difference in the world today. I'm also the founder of over 10 healthcare clinics, Gray Marketing Enterprises, and a doctor training business to help them grow their best practice. This episode is brought to you by gmedigital.com. That's Gray Marketing Enterprises, where we completely run your healthcare business, marketing to drive more patients to you so you can focus on providing the best healthcare possible. If you have ever thought, how can I see more of the perfect patients who need help? Contact us today. You can email support@gmedigital.com with any questions, or just go to gmedigital.com to learn more about us and what we provide our clients. Today, we've got Vinnie Fisher. He's been married to his beautiful bride, Debbie, for almost 25 years. He's got 4 beautiful children. Vinnie has built many businesses and has had the privilege to grow 4 of them to 8 figures. Today, Vinnie is a CEO and co-founder of Fully Accountable, which opened in early 2015. With his team, they built an outsourced accounting and finance firm who helps e-commerce and digital companies get better data so they can make better decisions to grow and scale with a greater profit margin. They recently made the Inc. 5000 list in 2019, ranking 26 with 148% growth. As a successful CEO, Vinnie has really developed a talent for building and growing world-class teams, and he's learned that a valuable company must grow beyond the shadow of the owner. And, you know, Vinnie also just let me know, and before we started, that they were also voted one of the best places in the U.S. to work. So congrats on that. And Vinnie, welcome to the show.
Oh, Scott, thanks for having me, buddy. Whenever Dr. Scott calls, you stop what you're doing. I love what you're doing, and I've listened to some of your shows, and Top Minds is exciting. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, man. Glad you're on here. And before we dive into, real specific questions and things like that, kind of give us an overview of where you are right now. I know that we spoke a little bit about, financial fluency, and we talked about owners getting out of their own shadow. Tell me really what your guys' mission and vision is right now and what you're doing with Fully Accountable.
Yeah, it's great. I think when I look at the tech stack that's available in the marketplace today, what used to be available 5 years ago, it didn't exist, right? So you had to do more things on your campus inside of your company. But with tech available the way it is today, I think of our mission. We say 3 things: time, money, and resources. Can you win back time that's valuable to you by using other expertise? Can you go buy it with money at a fraction of the cost that you would spend otherwise in your own organization? And can another organization have far more resources than you would want to budget towards the way you would supply it? And so when I think about accounting and finance to the small and medium-sized business, we live in that $1 to $50 million. And, sometimes in the kind of doctor's offices and those places where you can be above 500,000. But we live in that space where, can you actually buy back your time, where there's a branch of a department? Small and medium-sized businesses don't even have, this whole department, right? There's 4 people that exist: this executive bookkeeper, the controller, the financial analyst, and the CFO. There's 4 jobs there. So one of the reasons we're massively growing is we've created a package for those 4 jobs to be inside and create a department for a company for less than having an executive bookkeeper on your team. And the reason that's valuable is you're able to buy back time with experts doing it at a fraction or more time than you would actually dedicate to it for a fraction of the cost and far more resources. So why that's exciting, not just about Fully Accountable, but if you think about all of the components of your company in today's world, this idea that you have to do everything inside your building is kind of gone. Delivery of product to customer service to outsource parts of your marketing and work with someone like, Gray and do all the things that go along with that. That is really what I'm real excited about, is where the next stage of business with this fractionalized outsourced piece. You can't outsource the brain, right? You got to be the COO and that team that's on campus, just like our own executive team. But when you look to the other components of your company, now is the time more than ever where you can really coordinate those efforts and eliminate things that you couldn't even eliminate 5 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. And it's so true. And just for a little plug, obviously I've used Fully Accountable for years now. Vinnie and I met back in 2015 at I don't know if you ever did any other events other than strategy and execution, but your one and only big event, maybe.
One and only big event. That's right.
But hey, that I won't get into the details on my story, but that was a big turning point in my life. But a lot of it has to go back with, meeting you and be able to go into the Total CEO Mastermind with you and learning a lot of these concepts on time and money and resources. And, realizing that I didn't know my numbers. I wasn't running my business well. And, being able to outsource that and have, my numbers show up in my inbox every morning, right, and see where I am, and helps me make those decisions. But I want to kind of go to make a little left turn here with talking about going beyond your shadow, right? And you're talking about time. One of the concepts you taught, I think, from stage at that event, and then a little bit deeper as we talked further. But it's the one that you talk about. You have to be okay with a 70% version of yourself to be able to grow, right? To be able to, one of the things you said at that point, I was seeing patients as a chiropractor, right? And I could only grow so much because so much of my time was with individual patients. And I started to learn, well, shoot, I have to stop seeing patients to help more patients. I had to grow beyond and, really start to, see how that time, could be used more properly. So first of all, tell me kind of the story of where you got that 70%. I feel like I remember you learning that from a mentor, and how you've applied it. Maybe go a little bit deeper for our audience.
Yeah. And by the way, this is a great time to put a little plug for your show. So my team put a gift together for you guys. So at fullyaccountable.com/top minds, you also, one of your guests has to do is go in, plug in an email to get unlocked, and we'll send to them free of charge all these things I'm about to talk about. Multiple books and resources. Well, one of those books we wrote is a best-selling book called The CEO's Mindset. And in there, happy to send it to our crew. So please take advantage of that. And so that'll be in the show notes and the link. But what's important isn't necessarily that you'll go take advantage of the free gift. But back to that question of the 70%. I actually, what happened was it wasn't a mentor who taught me that principle. It was a mentor who showed me the opposite of that principle, where they would do everything. They would kind of correct the things I did, so they put their own handprint on it. Well, I took that approach into my early first 8-figure business, and I had to touch everything. And actually, I was the lever puller. And so when I stepped away from that company, all the levers I was pulling, it collapsed. And so we were doing multiple 7 figures a month in revenue. With this classic $50 million company that I write about in that book that we broke because actually this exact principle that I didn't actually build a team that could grow beyond my shadow. And so one morning I woke up, I'm like, people have used other kinds of this principle, so it wasn't hijacked from someone else. But for me, there's like, am I okay, even though I'm a quick start, for other people to do something at a certain level, even though it's not exactly the way I do it? And so it started this journey where I'm like, I just need to find like-hearted people who share my value system, being caring, competent, and committed. And if I can then take a matrix where they have a good attitude, they are willing to put in the right effort, right? Now all of a sudden, I can look to somebody and give them a little bit more of the benefit of the doubt, even though they're not going to do it like me. And that kind of allowed me the space to give them the space to grow. Now, thank goodness, with my type of personality, that happened. Because I'm a go fast guy, but I'm not a very processed and structured person in the sense of the way I run things. So having a team that can do that is really the reason why we've been able to have many employees on the team at the same time. I think it's the reason that led to a workplace kind of awards. It's the reason we keep growing businesses and cycle and move, because I got out of the way. And I think one of the big problems of a leader, whether they resonate with owner or entrepreneur, is we are really good at getting things done. When we we hand ourselves the ball. And I had to realize that if I kept handing myself the ball, I was going to have a very lonely, trapped existence that didn't grow beyond my shadow.
So, that's one of those things where it's like, okay, that sounds awesome to be able to have other people pulling levers, and it's not dependent on me. A lot of people worry that, shoot, if I go on vacation for 1 week, what's going to happen, much less, go away for longer than that. How does a leader get out of their way? How do they get others to start pulling those levers? And maybe, and the simplest, I know we can't.
No, I got you.
Right?
Doc, I've got one for you that is my number one go-to move. If you want to really take and resonate as a leader, some of the things that you are intentionally or unintentionally doing, what I would consider as possibly wrong inside your organization, I think it centers on one thing. It centers on the team around you critically thinking. And here's what happens, right? There was a kind of multiple studies done on brain behavior. You ever left the house and you wonder if the garage door is closed or if the coffee pot got shut off? Well, yeah. Inside your brain is efficient enough not to commit that to memory because it doesn't need to. Well, think about that analogy in leadership. When people come in your office and ask for things that they need done or your opinion on things. And one of the things I learned early on during that lever pulling phase was I was giving everyone answers. What I should have been doing all along is giving them questions. So a basic example, to pick on marketing stuff. If someone comes in the office and says, what do you think about this design or think about this landing page or this set of copy? I will naturally now, what used to be a process that I would like to suggest to you, I would just ask them a question. What's your opinion? What do you think about it? What do you think which one do you want to go with? And I would force them to continue to have an opinion. And then I could coach them through whether that's a wise decision or what's the better one. But if you start with just giving them an answer, their brain is efficient enough to rely on you. And it's an accidental micromanagement where you're not growing people up. So my number one solution to this problem is, I don't care, I believe in a farm system. Hire them young, train them up. So I think it requires a little more effort on that part, but you can't come in my office and expect me to just directly answer a question, even though I know the resistance. That might sound like that's going to take longer, but I get so many compliments about how our executive team is able to process without me, and I'm truly not trapped inside of our company. Again, there are parts where I add a lot of value, but at the end of the day, I've got people who every day, it just happened like it does every day. This morning where Jordan from our marketing team asked me a question, and I'm like, what do you think about what should we do? And she fired back with, let me think about it. I'm like, great. That's exactly what you need to do. Just think about it. And that is the journey that actually builds people. And if you look at the other way around, be honest with yourself. You probably have a bunch of minions who are just waiting for you to make a decision for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I never consider myself a micromanager. I don't like the details. Yeah. But, we did a quarterly meeting one time where my team was saying that, we need more ability to make our own decisions and, not have to ask Dr. Scott everything. And that was a total shock to me because I thought that, they could just do it all. But it's just like you said, they would come to me, I'd give them answers, never get them to think. And, looking at your team, it's, to see how young your executive team is and how well they do. And, to think about, there's a lot of people, there may be people on here listening that have never built a 7-figure business. And, right. You've built 4 8-figure businesses. That's right. So it's like, just going into that, obviously we can see some of these things that we're talking about as part of the secret sauce, so to speak. But what would you say is your biggest focus or lesson maybe that you've learned that's helped you to, be able to grow so many businesses as big as you have?
Well, I'll probably have 2 things. And then one small thing I want to jump on from that last part. When you pay attention to the questions you're asking, you got to be careful about my first version of questions. I would ask questions that would tip towards an answer.
Yeah, you're kind of leading for what you want to hear back.
Yeah, and so you're doing the same thing. You just turned it into a question instead of telling them what to do. So be careful about that. You are helping develop a habit of critical thinking. I do it with my children. I do it with all kinds of people. It really starts with helping them process thought, not tell them what to think. And so that's robotic on the second part of it. So enough on that. So back to your question, like what are like this idea of like what I do in business. Two things I've learned. There's this thing, it's an addiction of the grower. I'm a grower. I wake up every day. I am honestly fighting every day the satisfaction of the size of the organization. Every day, I'm a grower. I just am a grower. And so you tell me we did 400,000 in sales this month. I'm like, I want to do 600. I'm mad that we're not doing this. I cannot actually shut that off. I can manage it. I can actually be very mature about it, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to actually ever wake up and say, you know what? Don't be a grower. It's like asking a frog not to hop. It hops. Here's what I've really done though. I've actually put some insulation in our company from my desire to grow and allowed my COO and I to actually have a cadence where there's some conversation. And there's two ways I've done that. One, I recommend everyone get a book. I write all my thoughts down in my book and I kind of read them and then I write an email. I think, does that even make sense? Are we ready for that? And through maturity, I've realized I would lob in too many ideas. And so what we do is, I can send this, I can add this as part of the gift page at /top minds, but I run everything in 90-day sprints with our executive team. And I say, okay, is this something we can accomplish here? Did we accomplish it last time? And it started to expose my 19 ideas I had at the same time and how those didn't get done. So the principle there is to think a little longer, right? Actually have a little longer thought process to the way you're going to do something, but break it up into chunks to do it. And then the other thing that I think is so huge, you can't run more than one thing. We think as growers or as leaders that, you know what, there's like this magic, it runs itself thing that goes on. And one of the enemies of that is the tech stack that I spoke about earlier in our show, automation. We think if we just automate it, it magically goes. I'm an investor. I own multiple companies, but I actually have one job. That's my job. All my other stuff is like, people joke right now, my full-time job is being a dad of 4 teenagers and my side hustle is our soon-to-be 8-figure company. And I'm excited. We're on a journey again. You said something earlier, only 6.9% of companies ever see 7 figures in revenue. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about a smaller category. We act like everyone goes there. And then to go from 7 to 8, less than 2%. It's not a category that most people swim in. So I don't take that lightly. I'm very thankful. I feel massively privileged to have had the opportunity to do that more than once. And here we are on that journey again. And I will tell you that most of the time, when I look back at what I've done and what other people are doing, and they fail for lack of cash flow, it's because we get to this stage in our business where we're like a teenager. We know enough. We think we know everything, and we don't really want to hear other advice, but we want to do 19 different things. Businesses are like that. I put just enough cash in the company, and I have just enough kind of opportunity because I have a little bit of space and margin, and I want to go chase multiple things. I can tell you that the couple of the 7-figure businesses and 2 of the 8-figure businesses that I broke were because of this teenage mindset.
Yeah, so that's, it's kind of like, all right, I figured this thing out. I know how to generate leads or generate this, and like, oh man, I could do this in this area, and this area. And then it just like everything blows up. And yeah. So let me ask you
that comment, Doc.
What's that?
I resemble that comment.
So, oh yeah, me too. Too many ways. So you talked about, I remember you have brought this up before with our group when we had Total CEO. One of the worst things that happens, someone goes to a conference and then they come back and they just blast their team with ideas and excitement and overwhelm them. And you talked about having that insulation and thinking longer about it. Do you schedule in thinking time, and how much thinking time do you actually take to just think about your business?
Yeah, I'm in my home this morning because our show was scheduled at a time where I was just on the edge of the end of my time. So every day, as I've continued to grow in business, I block the morning One, for thinking. Two, for me, my faith is really important. So I spend a lot of time in devotion. I kind of spend time in gratefulness and thankfulness, kind of wake up in the morning. And then I read. And then I research and I write and I investigate things. And I look inside of our business. I look inside of, am I buying another one to add on top of it? It's my time. My wife would love it if I threw a little exercise into there. But, and I've got the margin to actually do it in time. I'm just have not developed the habit. And so that's for her. So she'll be thankful after she hears this. Thank goodness you picked up being fat and bald. And so I actually block my mornings. They're mine. Only once a week on Tuesdays after our Bible study I attend, will I have breakfast with a man, and make that margin for it. But otherwise, I really block until 11 a.m. every morning. And I really guard that because it allows me to work on the business, allows me to work on me, it allows me to work on and remove a lot of noise so that I can think. You know, Henry Ford said, the hardest thing to do is think. That's why few men do it. And I think you need to remove a lot of noise in order to think well.
Absolutely. And I think that, well, let me ask you this, being, a grower, being a guy that, just wants to grow, wants to do more. Was it hard for you to say, yes, I'm going to stop, and to actually get that into your schedule? Or was that something that came naturally to you to be able to do that? I feel like that's something that we want to be busy. Like that's how we may feel productive, right? It's mixing up busyness and productivity and whatnot. I mean, was that a hard thing for you to put in your habits?
Great question. I actually would say it's a bigger thing for me on this journey of self-awareness. I actually probably like a certain set of entrepreneurs, owners, and businesses. I have a hero complex. I want to be the hero, right? So I actually even broke one of our businesses unintentionally, realizing that I was bored and I broke it because I needed to be the hero. I was out of it so much that I broke it. Well, that's a thing I really wake up constantly having to make sure I check at the door, this desire to be a hero. So think about your daily pattern, like when your phone rings at 7:00 at night. You want to help people. You naturally go to pick up that phone because you want to be, at least for me, I want to be the hero. And so I started putting guardrails in my life to actually protect me against myself, first and foremost, and recognize that I don't need to answer every question. I don't need to actually be the one to solve every problem. Even though I've been gifted and have the capability of possibly solving those problems, it actually indicted me on a bigger issue that I felt this need to be involved in it. I got my identity from solving people's problems. So just a long answer, I had a massive friction putting it on my calendar. Like every day, a great guy in my life will say, hey, can you talk at 9:30? No. Oh, I'm not available only in the mornings. I'm sorry, man. That's just, unless it's an emergency, we're fighting for your marriage, we're going to have to find another time. And again, if we have those issues, we hit the hot button, we take the call. But I guard those. And I've had to learn as a hero complex problem, a grower, the more I can fight for my calendar, actually the more efficient and the more progress, the more I grow. Quite honestly, in a compressed amount of time, I can do more if I'm focused.
Yeah, absolutely. In healthcare, many times, you go into the office and you just start seeing patients. Yeah. You're working with your staff. You're doing your thing. I see that as a big miss out with doctors and whatnot to grow their businesses.
Especially doctors, because think about I used to be a healthcare lawyer, right? So I know the practice very well. And, I think Foley's going to expand into healthcare this year, which I'm excited about that. But when you think about offices, you make money on minutes, right? And so when you have meetings stacked on top, I get it. You're a widget. You're a technician in your own company. So that's how you make money. What I would do is design my system to either have another technician where I can, fully accountable as a labor company. I completely resonate with a doctor's office. My entire ROI is on labor. And so one of the problems that any technical professional has is who's doing the work. Are you the craftsman or is someone else the craftsman? And you opened up the show with you getting out of the way of being your own craftsman. And enterprise and growth requires professionals to look at who's the craftsman. If you're it, like I was in my law firm, then I actually have to have other craftsmen who are billing on their time, and I'm creating margin in labor on their time. And so the first thing that people resist is, I don't have any time in my day. That may be true. And so are we going to fight to add time to your day? Probably going to be tough. Well, then how do we buy back time? And one of the ways a professional should buy back time is another professional.
Yeah, love it. Buying back time. So let's kind of turn to that. And you just talked about fully accountable, getting into the healthcare field.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this financial fluency in leaders. And, where do you see the biggest mistakes being because everything you just said there is, hire another professional, the money for the labor, the return on investment. Most business owners don't even understand financially what their business looks like, how it works, and how that would work. So what are some of the biggest mistakes you see in a leader and finances, and maybe like a tip or two for them?
Okay. All right. Well, our entire company, Fully Accountable, exists because of me. I'm like an ideal client. The language of business is finance. And I didn't speak the language of business. I didn't speak it at all. And one of the messages that I hear out there today is this idea that we have to speak that language really well. That actually didn't work for me. I didn't know things like contribution margin or labor rate or profit margin, or these were intimidating terms. Like, let's go to the big ones like EBITDA, or like these terms were massively intimidating. And let me be clear here. I'm a professional too. I was a corporate M&A attorney with a tax designation. I'm not like, I'm like you, Doc. I've been very schooled, and I still had this massive intimidation to a language that I didn't know. And so, like doctors, lawyers, engineers, even some people who would claim to know some things about finance, it is its own terminology. Insert joke for doctor and lawyer. Now, back to the whole point of my loving comment. I'll give you a great story. You ever watch Shark Tank with your wife, and you're on the thing, and you're watching a bright Scott up there telling his idea about regenerative medicine? He's got this whole new thing he's going to do, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And they start hammering him on his numbers, and he doesn't know. Well, I found myself yelling at the TV, how do you not know that? Oh my gosh, you were getting ready for the show. How would you not know that? I remember Debbie being like, well, that's you.
I'm like, oh.
How you can take a temperature of yourself as a leader of your business. And there are primary metrics. Most of them are very similar to all companies on the primary level. You should know some of these things. Like, for example, and by the way, the punchline is, if you don't know some of these things, then I would say you don't have enough financial fluency. You're too removed from your business. You should know these little things. Now, you don't need to create them, but you need that information. And that's important. So, for example, if you run a practice, then you should know what is the accepted profit margin of the type of business you run. I remember when we were running our health supplement company, and we were making an 8% profit margin. And we should have been making 20%. So instead of being excited about my 8%, I was losing 12% a month. It became my target to find out why I was losing that. Now, in our gifts that we have at /Top Minds, I wrote a book called False Profits. In there, I talk about this concept of solving for X. And the big thing I learned was I was spending too much money to acquire the customer. And I only would have known that by putting this profit margin at the bottom and defending where I was leaking in the bucket. So for professional practices, it's all about labor. And what you can find out real quickly is that in professional practices like Fully Accountable, a really good margin should be 30%. Well, if we're at 12, why are we at 12%? And if you look at a practice, I always find out the number one problem. Ready? Your labor's out of whack. So a labor statistic on a company that ROIs on labor, 50% is like your little number you start to measure. And then are you at 45? Or are you at 55? Are you at 58? Are you at 62? The education system is all out of whack because they have a labor problem as it relates to the way they bring in revenue. And so these are metrics that need to be measured. I don't want to go pick on government or politics or school right now because they have their own issues to solve. But you and I, in the private free marketplace sector, are men who need to pay attention to these indicators, because these indicators are actually the things that truly lead to business enterprise. You know that 80+% of businesses will go out of business because of lack of cash flow. And lack of cash flow is usually destined on these leaky bucket items. And that if we could fight these leaky bucket items, we could actually win more in the game of business. And we wouldn't be a statistic like I have been a few times. And that's what I woke up and realized. I needed to know enough cocktail napkin math inside the type of business I run in order to actually be effective. Here's the great part. Once that started working for me, my creativity went off the roof. Like I got better at my part of the job because this fear of what I was avoiding, actually I stopped avoiding.
So if you're having cash flow issues, especially in a professional practice, look at your labor and, what would you say is an acceptable, there's a couple of ways people look at it, right? Like I want my labor to be 10% of revenue, or they look at each person, they say like, I'm spending, let's just round number, I'm spending $40,000 or let's say $50,000 a month on labor. So my revenue should be 3x that, 4x that. Like what kind of numbers do you look for?
Unless you have a product mix in there or some other ways that revenue is generated and you're a straight labor company, the numbers are much higher than that, right? The reality of labor is that's why I gave you that 50% category. So here's how let's just use my example. Let's say you have $100 and you spend 50 of it on labor. What you start to watch is knowing what's an acceptable labor rate. Let's just say 50% is it. And if you're at 55%, then your realization rate for each person in the company might be low, means you're overstaffed and under-cliented. But the same is also true. Businesses get in trouble on both sides of those pendulums. So if you're at 45% labor, usually what happens is an owner is overtaxed with the amount of work he or she is doing, and there's room in your effective leverage on your return on your investment of hiring people to where you can move that back in place. Actually, what I would find in most good tech-run doc practices is that there's room in their margin to hire somebody. They just don't want to give up that piece of it, and they'll work themselves to where their fingernails are like hanging on the edge of a cliff. And the sad part is that business could probably be more profitable with a mindset towards managing ROI than it would be to like effectively make every dollar I can for myself.
Right. It's like they think the hiring someone else is going to just take money out of the margin as opposed to, this is an investment where, it'll bring that much more revenue into the business, right? And could totally improve ROI. So yeah, very good stuff. So let me ask you, so this is, I'm totally shifting here. Over the last couple of years, knowing you personally, you've gone through a lot of different things from, while running this business, building this business, running a mastermind, there's been health things you've dealt with, there family things you've dealt with. Over the last couple of years, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you've learned, and how has it changed how you've run your business, run your life, those kinds of things? And
so I recently had validated for me a principle I'm going to tell you guys. And if you want to, guys and gals, and if you want to get a hold to this principle, I just read a great book recently by Phil Knight called Shoe Dog. And he validated a principle I want to talk to you about. It was like, oh my gosh, it was like speaking to my soul. As a leader, you vocationally have a job, but as a leader, you're also responsible with managing people and stuff. And he said something in that book that resonated with my soul because I've been living it. And this is the idea that when I wake up every day, my job as a leader is to actually solve problems. And so as I continue to advance, I'm solving problems. Early on, I would solve very technical problems. And maybe I'm solving relational problems now and leadership problems. But the point of the journey along the way, health, dad, my wife, my marriage, my teenage kids, my growing business, somebody stealing our intellectual property, you name the thing you want to talk about of the day, there's a scary thing that happens with like kind of moving along with your mind in leadership, is that you think you're going to eventually reach a point where there's no problems. And the idea is that you wake up every day with a privilege to solve them. One has a mindset in positivity. The other one's kind of anchored in optimism, this overestimate of some result that you're going to reach there. And the principle was that if you can actually believe that you wake up with the day with solving problems, some big, some small, then you probably will be less likely to experience burnout. If you can be grateful and positive that that's what you signed up for, and be very sober and aware of the fact, I don't want these problems. They're just real, right? In my faith, we've been promised a trial of many kinds. And so how do you have a mindset that allows you the privilege to be positive and endure? Endurance was the beauty of that. Like, how do you endure through that? Well, I think if you believe you're somehow, reaching this idea that there's never going to be a problem, that it all solved itself, you're more likely to approach burnout. If you can look at this endurance, that the privilege of being in leadership and business is a vocation, and the race is the journey, not the end of it, I think you're going to be far along towards joy, peace, being content, content was a word I hated. I always heard it as complacent in my ear. But being content, the idea that I wake up, there was 4 or 5 problems today. My job is to lead leaders and help think through those. That's what I have the privilege to do. If I'm whining about it, I've lost the entire joy to where I am in the continuum.
Yeah. Oh man, that's great. It's a great way to frame it, because I think you're right. So many people will come in, and I've been there. So I'm not saying other people, I'm saying I've been there, where it's like, why is all this happening? Why are we going through this? This sucks, or that sucks, whatever. And
so, by the way, principle for me, Scott, on that is, I'm so glad you said that. I used to find myself, why is this happening to me? And now it's, what do you want me to do with it?
Yeah.
And so if I get caught in whys, we all do. We get tired. Sometimes I say, just take a nap, because we get tired. And at night, for me, bad things start rolling through. A lot of whys at night. And I realize I just need to take a nap. But these are not the time to make big decisions. And so I joke and say, as I'm getting older, maybe just take a nap and then make a decision. Also, practically, if you got a lot of whys going on, then it's very internal, meaning it's very pressure laden on top of you, and you're looking for external excuses. And then I literally turn that in, all right, what am I supposed to do with this? And that exercise helps a ton.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's just reframing and thinking of it that way. And Randy Davis, a guy that you know as well, Randy said to me, Scott, if you didn't have these problems, people wouldn't be paying you to solve them. You wouldn't have this company. And it's the people that can solve the biggest problems that's what we're doing, right? We want to grow these big businesses, but the issue with growing a big business is the problems get bigger. They're more of them, right? And it's kind of like, Steve Jobs said that one time, is that you kind of have to be crazy and obsessed to continue through this, because anyone else will just be nuts to deal with this. But at the same time, I think what you're saying is so true of reframing it this way. And I think that, when I first met you, Vinny, we did a mastermind before strategy and execution. And I remember sitting there, and the first thing you did was start to go through like mission and vision. And I'm sitting there like, are you serious? Like, this guy, like, I came to a mastermind and we're going to do our mission and vision. Like, are you kidding me? So I was just thinking, like, why do we need to do this? That was one of the most valuable things I had done. I had not revisited that. And having that vision of where you want to go can help you endure, right? Help you endure and know, like, there's a reason behind us dealing with all these decisions that we get to make and get to deal with every day, because on the other end, we're working to accomplish that mission and that vision that we have, right? And that goes back to 2015 when you got me going on mission and vision again, because it helps this endurance thing. Because if there's not something that you want to do, and if we don't really have that goal, man, it seems like you're solving problems for no reason at all.
Man, you're speaking to my heart, man. Like, and so I think as part of that breakaway, think kind of when it's quiet, man, if you're someone who loves the action, like I love the action, quiet's hard, right? And I think in that quietness, if you aren't the one, one of the things I've really come to have a great joy of is really nobody else on my team wants the privilege and risk the burden that goes along with trying to look around the corner. Right? Most people didn't sign up for that. And so if you're not actually kind of parked on kind of vision and mission and gracefully trying to guess on strategy through all that, well, then who is? Like, yep. If you really kind of take an assessment of your business, no one else ever signed up for that. So if you have a frustration meter that no one else is on that wall, an alert, no one else is, because that's the wall you're supposed to be on. And so I'm thankful that I've gotten a little bit better at that. And one of the reasons you teach things is because, and honestly, you need to be doing them too. And so for me, that's a constant reminder that my job is to stay on the front of that wall.
Yeah, honestly, it's something you just said there. I one of the things I love about when I get to do my seminars and teach doctors growing and running their businesses, so on and so forth, is I'm up there preaching to myself.
Yeah, right.
And I've got my team there, and then they can be like, Dr. Scott, you're not doing that. What are you talking about? So it's a reminder as well to do those things. So
I really firmly believe, Solomon was a wise man. He taught there's nothing new under the sun. We just get so bombarded with a bunch of noise. So it's so great. I think we need to be masters at the simple, because then the simple stuff is really where most of my money has really been made.
Yeah, that's it. It is. It's the old things come back around again. Nothing is new, and it's simplicity. Simplicity is the key. You can't scale complexity, right?
Yeah.
And it's when you keep it simple is when things start to grow and whatnot. So you talked about Solomon there, and I want to throw something out, put you on the spot. I know that you just went to John Eldredge's Wild at Heart experience, so to speak, and we got to go to one of those together. What number was that for you now?
4 in a row. It's his boot camp. Yeah, he runs at least one of those a year, and they're great. And what's your question? What's the?
So I just want to ask, what was your biggest takeaway from this one? That you think would be something that would be great to share with our audience?
I think we're all on a journey of being wholehearted to gain back and restore what was lost. And in our lives, that story is so different for all of us. What part of your story were things lost? And so there are things that happen in your career, in your relationships, where some big wounds, losses happen. And along the way, when that story keeps getting weaved in your life, you make agreements. You make these unilateral agreements. For me, some of them were shame, being alone. I needed to be a poser and lie in every category to manipulate my way through things so that people didn't discover me. Well, every year I keep dragging more and more men because, in order to really if you want to be an excellent leader, both in your home, in your marriage, with your children, and your business, well, then that's going to require a journey in, and you'll find out so much, for me, about my heart, because I think of it as the control center, not the brain. Now, I'm an intellectual. I like to think about things, and my brain's important, but the connection between those two are so critical that I find that a lot of people in business, that the wounds and the agreements they made around them are what truly hold them back from a wealth that's measured by more than just money.
Yeah. And yeah, thank you for sharing. I mean, that's that could be a whole podcast too, right? Digging into that. I mean, that's 4 days, and you keep going back to learn more and more about it.
And it's selfishly for me, this was the best one. So I'm so thankful for it. And let's maybe dive into that another time and feed. But I love it. Check out John Eldredge's Wild at Heart. If you're a man in that journey, his wife has stuff, Stacy, for Captivating for Women, and it's great stuff. Now, for me, that's important. That's anchored on Jesus, but the principles are strong there. If Jesus isn't your anchor, you'll still find a lot there.
Yeah. We're definitely like-minded there. And you were talking about reading Phil Knight's book, and I wanted to have you talk about something here that is when I think it was the last Total CEO I was at, and you were talking about a new way that you were reading books. You said that, first of all, you were going back and reading a lot of old books, right? It's like we read so many good books and we're always trying to find that next book. It's like, oh, let's go back to some of our best 10, right? And read them over again, and share that method you were using as far as just with the book and the audiobook and everything. Because I did that and I love it.
Okay, cool. There's two things I want to say. I want to start with a big premise. I think every book has a principle or a couple principles. You ever read a book and you feel like you get halfway through and the second half of the book is just like a kind of reordering of the first half of the book? Mm-hmm. Well, that happens. And so, I'm a voracious reader, so I enjoy reading. But I've come to learn that each book, including my own books, have principles. And so I try to read a book now to discover its principles so that I can take that part out of it and apply that in whatever I can use inside of my life. And so books aren't universally great. There's only one in my heart that's universally great. And so I lead back on the Bible all the time. But what I do for reading is, like, I was on a train. I'll just tell you a story. I was traveling from London to Edinburgh, and the conductor was really noisy, and I kept getting interrupted. But for most people, you ever read a book and you're like in it deep and you almost romantically dive in the book so far that you almost forgot what you just read? Well, I can do that in reading. I can get drifted on into a book and I'm like, oh, did I just read that? Or do I have to reread that? Or did that plant enough deeply subconscious that it'll take? And it, quite honestly, a lot of times that didn't. So in that trip, I stuck my earbuds in my ear, and I actually started listening on my Audible account at first of all, at 1 time speed. And it was like, and the guy ran down the I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. So I had it on my Kindle, and I moved it up to 2 times speed. Now, for about 30 seconds, my brain was like, okay, try to keep along. But you'd be shocked how quickly my brain caught up to that. Sometimes I'll do it at 2.5. I never go below 2. But now what I do is I read it on my Kindle and have it in my ear playing at the same time. And I not only absorb books obviously a lot faster because of 2 times the speed at which I would normally absorb it, I'm also retaining more. And I'm actually being able to take some notes on those principles. And so it's funny, I'm just going to throw out there, I almost won't get a book unless I can get the Audible too. Like, if I could find a book with the Audible, that's like on the first list. Now, there are some of my favorites that, C.S. Lewis wasn't around at the time, so if I want to read Screw Tape Letters, I'm going in and reading Screw Tape Letters, and maybe someone else did an Audible version of it, but there are books where I just have to live with that. But for the most part, I'm trying to do both of those.
And that, it works so well because, there's some books where the 2 times was too much. I mean, and what I'll do, Jeremy Weiss, our buddy Jeremy Weiss, taught me a thing. He said, just listen to it on 3 times for a little bit, then go back to 2 and it sounds great. Just
right.
Your brain gets used to it, right?
It'll catch up very fast. So don't give up, listener. It will, your brain will adjust, and I couldn't go below 2 if it was possible.
Yeah. And I find that when you read along with it, with the actual book, you actually read at that 2x speed.
I don't have any problem keeping up now. I don't know if I was a slow reader or a fast reader, but my brain adjusted for whatever speed it needed to keep up with.
I found it was so much easier listening and reading, so I wanted you to share that. So
and I don't have the sharpest brain, so if I could do it, anybody can.
So anyone, there we go. All right, cool. Well, is there anything else we're leaving out? Anything you want to share with our audience, Vinny, before we get going? I definitely want
two things.
Yeah,
one is, first off, Scott, keep doing this. There are so many men and women who feel like they're doing this alone, and shows like yours are helping people feel like they have a tribe, and they don't have to do this alone. So thank you, first off, that you've created space to do this. I know lots of people will be and are already sending you comments and thank yous, and I know it's hard and the production and all that stuff. So thank you for that. And then 2, take advantage of the gifts in the show notes. You'll see that /top minds. Take advantage of those things. They're free. They're yours. I just want to help you succeed at this journey of growing your vocation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vinny. Appreciate your time, man, and appreciate everything. I'm just so grateful for your friendship and what you've meant to me over the last 4 years, and I'm glad that we could share some of that wisdom with everyone else. So thanks so much, man. Appreciate you.
Good to see you.